In today's lesson, you will be solving equations that have fractions with variables in them. So sometimes you do things a little differently. In this case, since I have three fractions and two of them have the same denominator, I am going to go ahead and rearrange things instead of leaving it as is. So I'm going to move the 13 over 2x to the left. I'm going to move the 3/7 to the right so that I can combine like terms. So my problem now becomes 19 minus 13, all divided by 2x, which I'm allowed to do because those have a common denominator. And if I move over the 3/7, it will become negative 3/7. So I will be left with 6 over 2x if I simplify the fraction on the left. And I could simplify that even more and make it 3 over x, but I'm going to leave it as is because I have more work to do anyway. Once you are down to one fraction equal to another fraction, then you have what's called a proportion. And when you have a proportion like that, you can do what's called cross multiplying. So hopefully some of you have heard that term before. So cross multiplying doesn't mean across, it means diagonally. So you will be multiplying diagonally across. There, again, are other ways to do this, but this is like the shortcut, kind of easiest way. So I'm going to go from top to bottom, left to right here first. 6 times 7 is 42. And I'm going to go from bottom to top. 2x times negative 3 is negative 6x. And if I divide each side by negative 6 to solve for x, I get the answer of x is negative 7. So I would put negative 7 into the box and then move on. I'm just going to do all 4 of your problems today so you can see what each one should look like. Number 2 should look something like this when you do your problem. And you'll notice that I can't do what I did on the last problem because I do not currently have any common denominators there at all. So I'm going to have to multiply to get a common denominator. So if you look, the largest denominator is x squared, which means I need to turn every other fraction or every other whole number into something that has an x squared in the denominator. Well, in order to get a 1 that's at the front of my problem, that would be x squared over x squared. X squared divided by x squared is just 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. To get my second fraction equal to x squared, I'm going to have to multiply the top and the bottom by x to get an x squared. So that would give me 7x on the top, and that would get me x squared on the bottom. And on the right side of my problem, I have an 8x squared, and I don't need to worry about that because it already has an x squared. So there's my new problem. And when you're working with fractions where all the denominators are the same and it's set equal to another fraction with the same denominator, I mean, you could keep going with the fractions, but you could do this problem, since they're all common denominators, they're all going to cancel out if you keep going in this problem. So what you're left with is just the numerators. X squared plus 7x equals 8. So in order to solve for x, I'm going to have to do what we did all last quarter, which is either use the quadratic formula or factor or completing the square, whatever method you want to use. But for me, factoring is always my go-to because it's super easy. I need to set this equal to 0 to solve for x. So I need to move that 8 over to this side, which will now make it a negative 8. And now I can easily factor. The two numbers that equal 8 when you multiply and 7 when you subtract are 8 and 1. And I put the wrong symbol here. So in order to get a positive 7, I would need to have positive 8 and then negative 1. So 8x minus 1x is 7x. Remember that when you do this, this is not your answer though. You need to figure out what makes each set of parentheses equal 0. So what you could replace here to make 0 would be negative 8. And what you need to replace here to make 0 would be positive 1. it does ask you to use a comma to separate your answer. So if you don't use a comma, Digits is going to tell you you're wrong. You also shouldn't be putting the x equals in because it's already there on the screen. So just type in -8, comma 1. It'll let you do the opposite. You could do 1, comma, -8. It should take it either way. Number 3 looks simpler because you just have a fraction equal to another fraction. You could use common denominators like we did on the previous problem. I feel like it's way easier just to use since you have a fraction equal to a fraction or a proportion, just use the cross multiplication that I showed you in the other example. So I'm going to multiply this way first, which would be 8 times a and 3. Don't make the mistake of just putting it by the a. And then if I go the other direction, which I'll make red, that would be 7 times the quantity of a plus 8. So if I multiply the left side, I get 8a plus 24. If I multiply the right side, I get 7a plus 56. If I move my a's to the same side and subtract 7a from each side, I would get a. And if I move my numbers or constant to the same side, which would be the right side, I would have 56 minus 24, which is 32. So my answer should be 32. If you happen to get the same variables on each side, so if that had been 8a on the left and 8a on the right, they would cancel out, and then I would have had two numbers that are not equal to each other, and that's how you would get a no solution answer. I'm just going to double check my answer real quick because when I use my pen, I can't actually type stuff into the boxes. So I'm going to plug in my 32. 32 plus 8 is 40. And on the other side, 32 plus 3 is 35. And so 8/40 and 7/35 each simplifies to 1/5. So I know that I did get those right. Your last problem looks pretty easy, and I used a shortcut and then figured out that I did not do the problem correctly, and I'm having to do this problem over again because I just did, oh, the x plus 1s are the same, so I can just cross them out and solve for the top. Well, that only gets you one answer. So if you were doing that method, you would continue to get it wrong in digits because this actually has two answers. And the reason why it has two answers is because if we cross multiply right here, you're going to get an x times an x, which is x squared, which means two answers when you have an x squared. So instead of using the shortcut method, which I tried to cheat and use, we're going to use cross multiplying. So if I cross multiply where I just marked, it would be the quantity of x plus 1 times the quantity of x plus 7. And then if I go in the other direction, it would be 15 times the quantity of x plus 1. So if I multiply these out, x times x is x squared. If I do little smiley and big smiley, that's 1x plus 7x, which is 8x. And then if I do the two numbers multiply by each other, I get 7. And over on the right, if I distribute, I get 15x plus 15. So I need to move everything over to the left and then factor. So if I move the 15x over to the left by subtracting, that would give me 8x minus 15x is 7x. And if I move this 15 over, 7 minus 15 would give me negative 8. So I now have a problem that I can pretty easily factor. The two numbers that equal 8 when you multiply and 7 when you subtract are 8 and 1. And in order to get a negative 7 in the middle, it would be negative 8 and positive 1. So the answers that make these two sets of parentheses equal to 0 would be positive 8 for this one and negative 1 for that one, remembering to put a comma in between. So you should have 8 comma negative 1 or negative 1 comma 8.